Welcome to Cyber Frontier, bringing you the latest news, trends, and hottest topics that focus on advances in cybersecurity and cyber industry economics. Our expert yet down-to-earth hosts make cybersecurity straightforward. They ask the tough questions and make this challenging topic something that everyone can understand. Our candid approach lets guests open up on topics we would all like to see addressed. You can find us on the web at newcyberfrontier.com. That's www.newcyberfrontier.com. Now join today's host as he introduces the topic for today's new Cyber Frontier.
Hello, this is Abe Thompson coming to you from the SecureSet studios here in Colorado Springs on the new Cyber Frontier. Today we are blessed with the privilege of having as our guest Jennifer Kurtz, who's the Cyber Program Director at Manufacturer's Edge. But that's not even the whole story. Welcome to the show, Jennifer.
Well, thank you, Abe. Pleasure to be here.
Well, wonderful to have you with us. So certainly you're in your position there, and then I know that you still live very much in the education and academic space, and you serve as a consultant for Denver's SBDC and on the faculty at Regis and other places. Talk to me a little bit about the journey that's led you to sort of this position of excellence here in the cyber industry.
A lot of it's just curiosity and kind of luck. You know, as a kid, I wanted to be, truly. I sort of came into technology by the back door, although as an elementary school kid, I was very interested in computers and programming. It just fascinated me. But back in those days, women weren't really encouraged to do much more than teach. So I always wanted to be either Nancy Drew or Mata Hari, and cybersecurity to me kind of blends those those ambitions. And sort of from a professional perspective, I started working as a part-time data person at the National Security Council for the National Security Council staff when Kissinger was the National Security Advisor to President Nixon. So there I really became acquainted with notions around document security. Every night the Marines would come in and make sure we had clean desks and classified documents were locked in the vault and so forth. 3 write-ups and you were out of a job, that kind of thing. And then also we were very, in the copier days, fax days, documents were numbered, number 1 of 10, for example, and there was a clear signature, there was a clear paper trail by signature as far as who had actually seen a given document. So I was very aware of the tightness of security. Certain people were allowed to carry a document from one office to another and so forth when it was going over to the West Wing of the White House. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, it was really, you got the sense of lockdown and certainly didn't have the cyber kind of the porous perimeters that we experience today. The computers that we used were dumb terminals. They were connected to a mainframe. So it was very locked down. And then from there, after a hiatus as an at-home mom for 16 years, I worked for a network systems integration company in Fairfax, Virginia. And the company was a Beltway bandit. I was put on a project to develop a security solution for the first electronic tax filing system. So for individual taxes, as opposed to, it was really cool, as opposed to the teletax. I don't know if you maybe don't remember that, where it was a touch tone telephone and you'd enter your tax data that way. But back then there were different protocols, different frameworks being looked at, like X.400 as a way of organizing information communications globally. And IP wasn't actually the one that we thought was going to be the lead. The whole TCP/IP was not the one. We were looking at much more structured information, more along the lines of electronic data information, the EDI kind of transactions that were much more structured than the free-flowing TCP/IP email and so forth that we experience today.
Could you imagine if we had walked out of through a time warp from those days of our pouches going from office to office to now? I think we all would have had heart attacks.
Oh my gosh! Well, and I think that I have that lingering effect because I see what some people do and I go, I have to sit down and breathe deeply. Go to my happy place.
Indeed,
yeah,
indeed.
It's stunning to me.
Well, let's take a
kids do.
Oh, sure. Let's take a quick break and go hear from our sponsor.
Cyber Resilience Institute helps build strong cyber communities designed to prevent members from attack. Like building a neighborhood watch, it takes coordination and a sharing community to protect our identities and valuables in the virtual world. Typically, we hear that organizations know they need to do something to protect their cyber assets, but don't know where to begin. Let Cyber Resilience Institute help your community create an action plan. Cyber Resilience Institute will build your community or business marketplace so that it is designed to support a collective cyber defense. Contact them for more information at cyberresilienceinstitute.org.
Okay, and then when I moved to Indiana, I worked at a large automotive supplier that manufactured alternators and generators for GM and others. And while there, I was IT manager, telecommunications manager, and then also put in charge of writing and implementing the first security documents that we had, that kind of thing. Because the company was a leveraged buyout from GM, and as a consequence, did not have a real history with email or anything. So we've really, our team, we got to build an IT capacity almost from scratch. It was very cool. So that was part of the chain of events. Then I moved to the Indiana Manufacturing Extension Partnership Center and worked for them as a project manager, and was invited by the governor to have to be the director of e-commerce for the state of Indiana. And in that position, I was able to, it just kind of furthered the journey as far as the concern of cybersecurity when I saw we were in that transition period getting into heavy-duty e-government, and at the same time you could see easily the disconnect between having all this information readily accessible, ubiquitous, concatenated in a way that you couldn't do if you were going from one public agency to another trying to gather information on individuals, for example. And here it was just being gathered into databases that were unprotected and just public-facing, and the focus was on easy for the citizen, but not all citizens are good. There are malicious citizens.
Right.
And with an administration change, I left there. I went to Purdue and joined the CERIAS, which is the Center for Education and Research in Information Assurance Studies, and worked with Gene Spafford, who's perhaps one of the grandfathers of cybersecurity. Yeah, he identified the Morris worm and that kind of. I mean, he's just brilliant and wonderful, and so and concerned about privacy, and working in that atmosphere it basically confirmed my passion, I guess, for security and privacy. That I worked for a small firm in a boutique security firm in San Francisco, and came here, worked with some clients on my own for like ISO 27001 compliance, and as an SBDC consultant, and co-developed courses and delivered courses on cybersecurity at Regis University, and wrote a book. Oh, and I also, when I was at Ball State, back in Indiana, I also taught telecommunications at Ball State, and included security as one of the chapters, basically, one of the course focuses, because I just thought it was so important. So, and then I wrote a book on hacking wireless access points, because it occurred to me that we're kind of like all channeling wireless signals, whether we like it or not.
Walking around on our wrist and and in our pockets and
everywhere. Yeah. Oh, everywhere. I just don't get it. But I'm at my core, I'm a Luddite, because
yes.
I don't trust technology.
One of my favorite words.
So there you go. So that's kind of my arc, and I was invited to join Manufacturer's Edge and work with smaller companies and help them become compliant with DFARS 7012 and just be more resilient in terms of their own approach to information practices and communication practices.
Do you find, sort of from that pulpit there at Manufacturer's Edge, that you have receptive audiences in the clients, or are they shell-shocked audiences who've experienced the worst of it and now realize their need to be secure?
Good question. That's kind of there's a traditional 4 risk appetites that we
Sure.
talk about in cybersecurity classes, and they range from paranoid to prudent to permissive to promiscuous, right?
Yeah.
And to those 4, I added perplexed and paralyzed, because I think where many of them are today is perplexed and paralyzed, whether because they've actually experienced a hack or some sort of a data compromise, or because they choose not to, really they choose not to look at what's actually there and what's happening. They'd rather not know. And then when it gets to the area of complying with, say, the DFARS 701, the Defense Acquisition Regulation Supplement, and those kinds of requirements, or the NIST 800-171, 110 security requirements, many companies don't know where to start, and they don't think it's relevant to them. They read about large companies getting hacked, but the hacks of smaller companies don't generally make the evening news.
Sure.
So, yeah. And they underplay what their value is. There's this funny kind of humility or modesty that, well, nobody would be interested in what I have.
Oh.
And
all that means is soft
exactly.
target and low-hanging fruit, right? For an adversary.
Yeah, and it's a different kind of fruit, because you figure, well, I think in part, I think we need to expand how we think about hackers. Traditionally, you go to any conference and the speakers, when there's a slide comes up on hacking, and it's the hoodie with the face you can't see, right?
Right.
And I think the hackers should be portrayed as next door neighbors. It could be portrayed as a military professional. It could be portrayed as a businessman, because so many hackers they're in the business of hacking. It's not just a script kiddie out there making mischief.
Right. They open their briefcase and open their lunch and sit down at a desk to wreak nefarious havoc on the rest of us.
Exactly. So I think there are some misconceptions there as well that that persist, and maybe give people a false sense of, this is not my problem, or believe that it's an IT problem when it's a business problem that we all share.
Right. It's interesting in looking at Manufacturer's Edge and kind of what you're doing now. I've been curious, and not to put you on the spot, I know you've had some interface, obviously, with the standards, and you've talked about, I know that you're concerned about NIST 800-171 compliance. But relative to that, I've heard that there is, in the manufacturing industry, a move to, because of ANSI standards that are now requiring people to have cyber compliance related. Is there a merger of these standards, or is there a whole new set of manufacturing standards that are coming out that have a cybersecurity ramification? Is that accurate to what you're seeing?
I think there's blending, there's incorporation. At this point, I think there's a lot of confusion in that different manufacturing sectors have come up with their own set of standards.
Oh dear.
So even when you're looking at things like shocker, another standard. Even when you're looking at things like DoD's effort to enforce compliance with security requirements through the proposed cybersecurity maturity model certification. Even there, rather than build strictly off the NIST 800-171, they've incorporated, I think, 7 or 8 different frameworks into the requirements, and so basically at least double the number of requirements from where it is today with respect to NIST 800-171, for example. I mean, it's 200 some.
We'll be with the rest of today's show right after these brief messages from our sponsors.
Murray Security Services are your cybersecurity experts with decades of experience providing professional training services for our clients in various industries. We offer professional training and certification in areas of cybersecurity, safety, health, and environmental services at our academy. Our in-person and online training provides a collaborative environment where students can interact directly with instructors through live chats or in private classrooms. Visit murraysecurityservices.com for more information.
Now, will that
So I think there's some confusion.
will that result in a panic by the manufacturing industry to kind of reach out for more cyber support, or what do we expect to see? How does that impact our larger industry?
What I'm seeing now is that I'm certainly receiving more calls. And our regional directors, our sales team, our members are seeing more interest. Whereas when I first joined, it was there was still, okay, that's nice to hear. Okay, it really doesn't apply to me. Except once you start talking with people and ask, well, have you received the wireless fraud, the fraudulent wire transfer requests? Have you received fake invoices? Have you received ransomware attack? And then people start raising their hands. And now people are coming forward and saying, oh my gosh, we need to do this. Or the flip side of that is some manufacturers are saying, maybe we don't really need to be in the DoD aerospace supply chain at all, which that's a real problem, because then that reduces the resiliency of those supply chains and diminishes supplier diversity and so forth. So it's the standard thing. It's really interesting. I do see more interest, and I write a monthly blog called Simply Cyber, in which I try to strip off some of the terminology that tends to obscure meaning and make it appear an IT problem because the terminology sounds IT, sounds technical, as opposed to just bringing the terms into what would it look like in the physical realm. If this same event were occurring, what would you do to protect yourself? How would you detect it? How would you recover from it, and so forth?
Well, I think that's an essential and very effective way of, making the education real, and that's kind of a segue too from, obviously the standards piece makes us then look backwards in the process to the education piece, and you've definitely lived in that space. What have you seen in terms of the evolution of information assurance and cybersecurity training for those that are going to enter the workforce? What are some thoughts you have about how we've changed?
That's a super question, because I see that one I see is somewhat of the in a sense, a demystification of cybersecurity. So rather than containing it to, say, the computer science department, there's more, I see more courses that integrate a bit of, cybersecurity thinking into, say, a business management class. I teach a project management class for healthcare professionals. And you can see it within healthcare, of course, because of HIPAA. There's a lot of concern around cybersecurity. So I see those changes, and also that it's being pushed down in that the recognition is there that you don't have to have a bachelor's degree and then specialize in cybersecurity. So it kind of depends on what direction you want to take it. So more community colleges are getting involved and putting together really fine course curriculum on cyber. Like Arapahoe Community College has been working on a good launch there. And
and Pikes Peak Community College down here is robust as well.
And Pikes Peak, exactly. And it's really solid. And I see more focus on certification and kind of training that will lead to success in passing certification exams, as opposed to which I have some mixed feelings about, because I still think people should learn how to write and they need to build business cases around security. But yeah.
Yeah, in our secure sec curriculum, we actually grade them on their grammar when they're writing reports and presenting to our mock boards. But yeah, grammar, articulation, technical writing, all essential if you are going to educate and empower your senior executives who have to make fiscal decisions and purchase cyber capabilities and all this other stuff. You better be an articulate communicator in multiple ways, for sure.
Exactly, and I think what you mentioned, the project management piece, that's huge, because a lot of security starts as a security project, and then then ideally it moves into process with refreshments, but really becomes part of the culture, because it's a lot of it is really a mindset around security.
Sure.
And I think what I'd like to see is a real focus on not so much on the cybersecurity workforce gap as on the cyber secure workforce gap, because I think all employees of any organization, all individuals, need to be aware of techniques that can be used against them and techniques that they can use to protect themselves.
Well, for sure. I remember in my time in the sort of the Navy and intelligence world, we used to say that everyone is an intelligence collector. And so every mission, when you're out there, get me some intel. It's not just me. And I think the same can be said for, everyone's a cyber warrior.
Brilliant. Absolutely. Marianne Davidson, who's CISO for Oracle, that's one of her mantras. She's a friend, and she says every Marine a foot soldier, or something to that effect. Because we're all in it together. Yeah.
So if you were to take a look back at, say, the traditional course load or curriculum that would have been taught when you first started in education, what did it look like compared to what should be being taught right now?
Great. A lot of it was, because it's academia, there is the tendency to go back beyond the memory of man. So you get a lot of historical, but I think that's important. I think what I'm seeing today is the blend of hands-on lab work is more and more prevalent, and I think that helps, because the theoretical can only take you so far. I do believe that understanding principles around programming and some of the basics, like I do think like the OSI reference model is valid, and it helps people understand how systems work, but with an overlay then at the level 8, the user, the user defined level,
the mystical level 8. Yep.
Right. Yeah. Because there's and that understanding that the real test of the system is when it's being used. The as designed and as built, that's those are different realities from as used.
For
So
sure.
I think that helps. I think it's a focus on some of the behavioral focus also, I think is really helpful that I see more of. The ideas around social engineering and the understanding that there is a business calculation with respect to many hackers these days.
Sure.
Like what is my ROI on the investment I make in a ransomware kit or an Android banking Trojan and that kind of thing? What is my payoff going to be?
We do a lecture.
So I think,
we do a lecture called Cybersecurity, RSOI, Return on Security Investment.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it needs to be flipped so that you're looking that students think from a hacker perspective, like based on what their particular motivation or object is, whether it's money, it's political influence, it's power, it's subverting somebody else's reputation. How would you go about doing it, and what is the best attack? And then you can see into where your own system vulnerabilities might exist.
Certainly. And that practical approach, the hands-on approach, as we're hearing from employers, really has improved the potential for people to break into the industry. And instead of saying, hey, I've got all this great theory that they told me about, they can now say, I've done this, I've built this application, I've learned how to patch, I've done this configuration, I've applied this software, I've used this SIEM, I've used this, I've Splunk or whatever the case might be. And it's a very practical conveyance of the reality that they know how to do the work, not just know about the work.
Exactly. And like the Cyber Patriot and some of these other the competitions, I think are wonderful and great. I remember when I was at Purdue, I was in a small session with a VP from Motorola, and we had a PhD, all this kind of thing. So he was meeting with some of our PhD students, and he was asking them, what their dissertation was on, and he sort of focused on one young woman and said, "So what are you doing?" And she gave this explanation that was, full of jargon and technology and all this kind of thing. He looked at her and said, "So why do I care?" And she looked at him, kind of cocked her head to the side, and she explained again at an even higher level of abstraction. And
the exact opposite.
Did the same thing.
Dear.
So why do I care? And it was this wonderful object lesson in that kind of the traditional teaching and that disconnect between why it matters in the real world versus why it matters for getting your dissertation, to get your dissertation done and get the paper.
Sure.
Yeah.
Two very different worlds. And now that we're seeing this, like you said, the community college and schools like mine, where it's like a cybersecurity trade school where we're putting some technicians into the industry. They may not have a bachelor's yet, but they have all the skills they need to do the work. So let's have this blended solution be part of filling the workforce.
Exactly. It just makes so much more sense. And, it certainly doesn't demean it actually grows the profession, I think, because there's so much variation in terms of whether you're going to be an expert and focus, subject matter expert and focus on a given tool, that kind of thing, or whether or not you're going to be more of a generalist, so be talking at a business level or customer relations or different kinds of training programs and so forth, compliance.
Indeed.
And I think getting the law, more attorneys are getting into it.
Oh, you're not kidding. That's been interesting to see that, for sure. Yeah. Well, and I remember when we started, I don't think people even understood what cyber crime was, let alone did we have cyber laws in place. And so we were trying to do a strategic map back to what existed in terms of law.
Yeah, exactly. I know when I was working on that chapter, I authored one of the chapters of an American Bar Association bestseller.
Oh,
We
nice.
sold 400 books in a year. So it's context, right? Yeah, exactly. But it was the Data Breach and Encryption Handbook, and it was the first kind of handbook for the legal system, just to kind of capture, here are some cases that can be looked at. Here's what we can learn from these cases. And the people around the table were mostly not attorneys, actually, who authored the different chapters.
Sure.
Yeah, it was interesting. Yeah.
Well, and as long as the attorneys were willing to listen, we were going to get somewhere, right?
Yeah, well, I met some incredibly brilliant attorneys through
Nice.
this. And
Nice.
Yeah.
It's been really neat, because clearly you have sat at some of the more pivotal moments in cybersecurity's evolution, and so we've been obviously very delighted to have you on board. I definitely want to get you back on, because there's so much more we can talk about. But Jennifer, I just wanted to thank you on behalf of the program and our audience for being willing to come on with us.
Oh, my deep pleasure. This was just fun. I think you and I should just go to lunch and just swap stories.
Indeed.
We can write a book.
Hey, yes, and you've already got that under your belt, so you could lead me in the process, for sure.
Here you go. Yep.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've had with us here on the new Cyber Frontier Jennifer Kurtz, who's currently the Cyber Program Director at Manufacturer's Edge, but definitely a luminary in our industry and font of wisdom. So thank you very much, Jennifer. And signing out from the SecureSet studios here in Colorado Springs, my name is Abe Thompson, here on the new Cyber Frontier. Good day.
Thank you for listening to New Cyber Frontier. Remember to follow or like our post and circulate each new show to your networks. We keep you informed, bring you the latest news, explore new trends, and find the hottest topics. With New Cyber Frontier, you don't have to be a computer or cybersecurity expert. Just get plugged in. We encourage you to get involved. Tell us what topics interest you and join our mailing lists. You can find us on the web at www.newcyberfrontier.com. That's newcyberfrontier.com. Check out our previous interviews and please let us know if there are any topics that you would like to hear discussed. See you next time on New Cyber Frontier.